and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Tucker.
And I'm Alex. Today, we will be carrying on with our Conjuring franchise with The Nun, made in 2018. The Nun was directed by Corin, but more noteworthy, it was written by Gary Dalberman and James Wan. With Wan and Dalberman being involved with the story, you might expect a great movie with maybe a solid storyline and very visually appealing, right? Well, some of that is right, but we'll get into that later.
In The Nun, Father Burke is asked by the Vatican to pay a visit to an abbey in Romania because a nun hung herself outside of the abbey, and Father Burke has to find out if there was any foul play that went along with it. Along with Father Burke is a young lady named Sister Irene, who has yet to take her vows to become a nun herself, and a French-Canadian man named Frenchie. Together, they start to notice that there is an evil nun that has ominous intentions, because she literally stands there and tries to act spooky most of the movie, as opposed to just killing them. Moving on, there are spoilers ahead, so if you have not watched the movie, feel free to pause the video, watch the film, and consider using our drinking rules that will be posted on the screen now. If spoilers are not an issue for you, or if you've already seen the movie, let's continue. The first rule we have for each drinking game is death. If you see somebody die, you take a drink. The total number of deaths we saw for this movie was 16, including premonitions. It is worth mentioning that this is a rather high number of deaths as far as Conjuring universe movies go. The next rule that we will always have here on Cheers to Fears is that if you hear somebody scream, cry, or yell, you take a drink. For this movie, we came to the conclusion that there was a total of 20 screams, cries, or yells, so therefore we took 20 sips from our alcoholic beverage of choice. Rule number 3 that will work in almost all horror films is that you drink when you witness a jump scare on screen. In this movie, we took a total of 24 sips, one for each jump scare that was seen. Now onto the rules that we have exclusively for The Nun, starting with if you see people praying at any time throughout the movie, take a drink. This actually didn't happen as often as we anticipated, as it only resulted in us taking 10 sips.
And let them live with you in perfect grace forever. Amen.
The next rule we'll be implementing into our drinking game is that if you see a shot of the Abbey, you must take a sip. For this rule, we counted shots of the Abbey 9 times. For the 6th rule in the Nun drinking game is that if anybody mentions Sister Irene has yet to take her vows, you have permission to drink your sorrows away by having a sip. It is very evident that Sister Irene has not yet taken her vows because the movie felt the need to remind us 5 times.
I haven't even taken my vows yet.
If there were any Conjuring universe movie that was about Christianity, this is definitely the one. One way this can be seen is that they mention the Vatican 4 times and Rome 3 times. This so happens to be our next drinking rule, as you take a sip each time either of these are said, resulting in 7 drinks.
The Vatican.
It's just you.
Rome is concerned about the safety and well-being of your cloister.
For this drinking game, we had something similar to our Annabelle drinking game, which is instead of drinking when you see Annabelle, you drink when you see the nun. For this rule, we had a total of 18 times where we saw Valak appear throughout the movie. Moving on to our next rule, you must drink each time you hear the word nun being said in the film. For this rule, we counted a total of 15 times people said the word nun.
I saw a nun.
Finally, our last rule, which is a bit of a weird one, that gave us 7 drinks. That rule is you are supposed to take a drink whenever somebody in the movie says hello.
Hello?
Hello?
And that does it for all the rules for this drinking game to The Nun. The total number of drinks for this movie, by our count, comes to 131 sips, which is equivalent to drinking about 4.5 standard 12-ounce cans. This is also only if you use our reference of a 30 sip per can scale. For The Nun, we left out quite a few rules. Some we could just not fit in, while others were for our own safety.
Yep, like the crucifix rule that we include in most other Conjuring universe movies. We obviously couldn't include it for this one. And that is because it gave us 126 drinks, which is equivalent basically to what our total drinking game is. So it'd be like doubling up in the end.
In saying this, I remember the first time that we created the mercy rule. It was called the crucifix rule. I guess still whenever we have movie nights, it is called the crucifix rule.
Yeah.
This is because we originally watched The Nun and we were just dying the entire movie. And we called it after one movie. We were originally supposed to drink to Annabelle Creation next, which would have been just as bad.
Oh yeah, especially with the crucifix rule in that one too. Because isn't that the other one that we eliminated in the end?
That's the other
So
one.
we literally probably would have ended up in the hospital. But yeah, basically, like 10 minutes into the movie, we were waterfalling the whole time. We're like, okay, we need to create a mercy rule for this now. And that's where the mercy rule came from.
So I guess some other rules that we considered but left out ultimately was when we see the key, for example, but that was only 3 times, so we didn't really feel like it was important enough to add in. Same with anyone saying the word suicide, that was also 3 times. The other times were when father was said, which is 35 times, and when sister is said, that's 42 times. So we left those out for obvious reasons too. It's just either way too high or way too low.
Yeah, and when we initially played this game the first time, along with the crucifix rule, we did father and sister as well.
Yep, and suicide, but the 3 drinks are nothing compared to, what is it, 77?
Yeah, something like that.
I guess the thing about a lot of these rules, it proves how kind of basic the movie is for the most part.
Yeah, like, because it's got such a strong religious undertone to it, there's so many rules around Christianity that we could have had, like the sister for the nuns, or father for the priest, or like, we have the Vatican included in our rules. So like, there's so many different ways you could go, which is why it was very easy to come up with rules for this one too.
Yeah. I guess just diving right into it, the main thing is there was just a couple of people in the castle, mainly 2 or 3 people in the castle that were just kind of getting spooked the entire movie. There wasn't a lot to it, and all of them had like some character-defining element. So for example, it was the priest that had an exorcism that went wrong, or it was a nun that hasn't taken her vows yet and sees visions, or a French guy who's a ladies' man.
Yeah, pretty much. And nothing is really expanded on with those points. Like, why hasn't the nun taken her vows yet? Are the other nuns against it? Or like, does she have doubts herself? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
And then Father Burke has a troubled past from the exorcism, but why not try to come to terms with it? Like, I don't know, it just doesn't explain or like expand on those 3 different points, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you can say that Sister Irene develops because she does end up becoming a nun in the movie because she takes her vows eventually.
Yeah, true.
And I am ready to commit my life to him.
But for Father Burke, there's just no real character, like, defining moment for him. He's just kind of there for the most part. And to be fair, Sister Irene is the main focus of the movie.
Yeah.
So it's just hard to see that Father Burke was just kind of a side role. And then there's Frenchie, who's just kind of stale the entire movie. He's basically just used for a plot point at the end.
Yeah, pretty much. So in our last video, which we discussed about Annabelle 3, we talked about how every time we watch it, we end up liking it more and more. With this one, it's kind of the complete opposite.
Yeah.
The more we watch it, the more we hate this movie. And, I mean, it wasn't a masterpiece to begin with, obviously, but I don't know, I guess the more you watch it, the more unlikable it becomes, it seems.
Yeah, you think about the movie a little bit more and you become more unattached to it. At the very beginning, it's just like this very beautiful, like, kind of church, the Abbey. You see that and it's like, oh, this looks really visually appealing. And then you kind of watch it a little bit more and you think of the storyline and how a lot of things just don't add up.
And I also think that Valak was a bit of an issue. Like, she didn't really do a whole lot, and she gave the characters a lot of leeway.
Oh, yeah. I guess the one thing that got Valak to coming back into the castle was there was Nazis that bombed kind of the area. So I guess the gates to hell were open because of that. So thank God for the Nazis. So she had a second chance at life.
Yeah.
But I mean, she could have spent like hundreds of years planning that and fucked it all up because she didn't do anything.
Yeah.
She obviously did not spend her time planning, I guess.
And one thing that I wanted to point out was this kind of just feels like a shitty episode of Scooby-Doo. Except Mystery Inc. actually finds clues onto why the place was haunted, whereas we're just kind of left to guess on our own what's going on here.
Basically, things are kind of presented themselves. The problems are presented to themselves. So there's a twist of like, Mother Mary points the way. There's no character-defining moment of her just finding something. They just see a statue just like pointing and the light shines off it so perfectly, like it's a movie.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I guess the other thing that just kind of presented itself is that all the other nuns in the Abbey were dead. It just feels so unrewarding when Sister Irene realizes that they're all dead, and they've all been premonitions of her psychic powers. For me, I feel like there was no setup and even less payoff if that's possible.
Yeah.
Because it was just kind of presented to us. There's no clues for anybody to figure it out.
Yeah, there's no way you could have guessed it, I guess.
Yeah, and there's no way that they figured it out either, so it just feels like it was just kind of presented in such an odd way.
Yeah, I agree with that point. So take Conjuring 1 and 2, for example, where there were clues leading up to it, such as Bathsheba using the mother to kill the children, or even in the second one with Bill Wilkins' message in the 2 audio tapes, like you could kind of figure out the twists. It's sometimes a little vague, but you can still kind of piece it together in the end. And like even if the Warrens didn't figure it out on their own, there was still a chance that you could have figured it out on your own. Like in this one, there's really no way to really figure it out.
And I guess what they could have done instead is it would have been a lot neater for Irene to discover that the other nuns are dead and for her to communicate with them on what Valak wants, what Valak needs, and how to try to stop her. I feel like that just kind of fits into it a little bit better. And it also works with her premonitions on how she's able to kind of see, and how there's a fan theory that she's connected to Lorraine Warren.
Yeah, but that's not the route they went. Instead, they just kind of randomly bring it out of the blue and all the nuns are dead. Like, I don't know.
They don't work on it. That's the problem.
Yeah. So, what do you think teenage audience will eat the shit out of? I guess an evil nun.
Yeah, and it's come to a point where James Wan has so many characteristics. So, like, the Bride in Black from Insidious shares so many characteristics from the nun. And it was good once, but when you do it a second time, it starts to have, I guess, a lot more problems because it's not original. So I guess these are some of the characteristics that the nun has and the Bride in Black has from Insidious. So first of all, tries to possess the main character. From another world, otherworldly. Praises a higher entity. Yeah, the mother, I guess, or Satan. Dresses like an innocent woman that should usually not be scared into normal circumstances.
Normally,
Yeah. Cross-dressing male.
That's the funniest part about it.
What else is there? Oh, harassing females with their supernatural powers and threats of killing somebody.
So yeah, clearly Valak is very similar in a lot of ways to the Bride in Black, and that seems to be a problem of James Wan. Like, he needs to have some more original monsters soon. It's usually just puppets. Like in Dead Silence, it's all puppets, or in Saw, it's Billy Doll, but
Annabelle.
Oh, and Annabelle, yeah. Or it's nuns, or people wearing dresses, or like black dresses and stuff. But he needs to have some more original monsters coming soon, or else it's just gonna get way too overdone if it's not already.
Look how La Llorona's on the way. I guess carrying on, one thing that I really did like in the movie, I mentioned it a little bit before, but it's very visually appealing. Just the look of the Abbey looks so cool.
Oh yeah, it looks really good, and it's clearly well shot. And I don't know, there is some really nice imagery in it, but that can only take it so far, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So one way that they could have made the nun better is if they made the nun kind of like a parasite, sort of like an imposter in Among Us.
Yeah, so I guess, how about they do this? Say there's a lot of nuns in the church, but one of them was evil and she was picking them off one by one, kind of like that concept. Or another thing that they could do is they could all be evil and insert plot point here, I guess, to manipulate Irene into opening up the portal into hell.
Yeah.
New Line Cinema, give me my $100.
So with all that said, what were your overall thoughts on this movie?
Again, visually, it's immaculate. Love the design. Set design, super unreal. It's just so much wasted potential, though.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't know, when I first watched it, actually the very first time I did watch it was when we did our drinking game to it. So I had a lot of fun with it, but that could have been alcohol playing a big role.
Oh yeah, there was a lot.
So like, this movie is fun if you drinked with it, but yeah, I mean, when I rewatch it without the alcohol involved, it's okay, but it's nothing too special.
That's fair. And finally, we come to the awards ceremony, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee, the Darwin Award. This award goes to the character that made the stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have been easily avoided. This award can also go to a character that is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Valak, for doing absolutely nothing the entire movie to the main characters. Valak could have tried to possess these people or kill them much sooner, effectively ending the movie.
Next up, we have the army that stormed the castle and used the blood of Christ to seal away Valak, as opposed to just using it on her and sending her back to hell. Not to mention, why did they store the blood of Christ somewhere super well hidden instead of somewhere where it's easily accessible in case Valak comes back?
The final nominee we have is Father Burke and Sister Irene for splitting up. Like, at all.
And the winner is... Valak, for being literally the worst demon ever. She should have just used the snake trick that she used with Frenchie much earlier on in the film and gotten away with it too.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed today's episode on The Nun. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments what could have made this movie better in your eyes.
Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode where we are going to be making a drinking game to the Curse of La Llorona. If you want to check out our most recent video on Annabelle Comes Home, click on the box on the top right. If you want to see a playlist of all of our drinking games we review, then click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying
Cheers to fears.